Extinction is supposed to be an ending. A lineage stops, its genes stop moving forward, and the world simply continues on without it. That is what the science book said happened to a species that shared this planet with our own ancestors for hundreds of thousands of years, a species pulled from a limestone valley in Germany in 1856 and declared, not long after, a closed chapter in the human story. Case closed, more or less, and rarely revisited for the better part of a century and a half. Except geneticists sequencing the genomes of people alive right now. Not fossils, not bones pulled from a cave floor, but living, breathing people walking around today, kept finding something a fully extinct lineage should never be able to leave behind. Not a fragment in the soil, not a tool beside a hearth, something still active, right now, this very moment, inside a living human cell, doing work it was never supposed to still be doing. In 1856, quarry workers in Germany's Neander Valley uncovered bones unlike anything then catalogued. Scientists eventually classified the species as Homo neanderthalensis, a separate branch of the human family that lived across Europe and Western Asia for several 100,000 years before vanishing roughly 40,000 years ago, not long after anatomically modern humans arrived from Africa. The standard account held that Homo sapiens simply outcompeted them, more adaptable, more numerous, until the Neanderthal line ended completely, with no genetic afterlife. That conclusion gained real scientific weight in 1997 when geneticist Svante Pääbo's team extracted mitochondrial DNA from the original Neander Valley specimen. Published in the journal Cell, the sequence fell entirely outside the range of variation found in any living human today. Evidence, it seemed then, of a clean, unbridged boundary between two separate species. Mitochondrial DNA, though, only tracks a single maternal thread passed from mother to child. It cannot see everything a genome carries. In 2010, the same Svante Pääbo, now at Germany's Max Planck Institute for Evolutionary Anthropology, published something far larger in the journal Science, a draft of the full Neanderthal nuclear genome, the genetic material inherited from both parents rather than one lineage. When his team compared it against modern human genomes collected from multiple continents, a pattern emerged that a clean total extinction should never allow. People whose ancestry traced outside Africa were measurably, consistently, more genetically similar to Neanderthals than people whose ancestry was entirely African. If the Neanderthal line had truly ended with no genetic contribution at all, every living human should be equally distant from it. This was not a rounding error, and it demanded a real explanation. Two explanations competed for that pattern. The first, ancient population structure, proposed that no real contact was needed, that the similarity reflected old genetic variation sitting in shared African ancestors, retained unevenly. It was elegant, but did not survive close examination. Interbreeding leaves long, unbroken DNA, stretches that shorten each generation as recombination cuts them apart. Exactly what researchers measured. Not old variations' fragmented signature. The second explanation held up better. Direct interbreeding in the Middle East, roughly 50 to 60,000 years ago, as modern humans leaving Africa met Neanderthals already there, before the lineage split into Europeans, Asians, and others. That timing explains why the signal appears broadly across non-Africans. But even this did not fully close the case, since East Asian genomes carry noticeably more Neanderthal ancestry than European genomes do. Confirming that the DNA survived was only the first half of the story. The deeper question was what it was still doing. In 2020, researchers Hugo Seeberg and Svante Pääbo, again at the Max Planck Institute, published findings in Nature identifying a 50 kilobase segment on chromosome 3, inherited from Neanderthals roughly 60,000 years ago, as one of the strongest known genetic risk factors for severe COVID-19, raising ventilation risk by as much as threefold. It is carried by roughly half of people in South Asia and 16% in Europe, almost absent across East Asia and Africa. The same researchers have since traced other Neanderthal variants shaping pain sensitivity. In October 2022, Pääbo won the Nobel Prize in Physiology or Medicine, cited for discoveries concerning the genomes of extinct hominins. Discoveries the Nobel Assembly noted still shape how the human immune system responds to infection. If a discovery big enough to win a Nobel Prize can still be this unfamiliar to most people, subscribing is the simplest way to make sure the next one doesn't slip past you too. Most people picture a family tree where the branches that ended simply ended. A relative with no children becomes a name on a page and nothing more. A line that quietly stopped moving forward generations ago, folded back into silence for good. This is a case where a branch every textbook insisted stopped 40,000 years ago is still, quietly, doing something inside nearly every non-African body walking around right now, today, in this very room, wherever you are. It is shaping how a fever runs its course, how a hand recoils from something too hot to hold, what a strand of hair does in the cold, how a lung responds to a virus that did not even exist until last decade. That is not folklore, and it is not a metaphor for connection across deep time. It is closer to a literal fact of biochemistry, a decision an ancestor's body made hundreds of centuries ago, still quietly running in yours, right now, unnoticed, unannounced. None of this is a stain on modern humans, whatever popular culture has done with the word Neanderthal as a casual insult for the better part of a century, shorthand for brutish or slow-witted. The evidence points the other way entirely, toward partnership rather than contamination. Those inherited genes likely helped incoming modern humans survive unfamiliar climates and unfamiliar pathogens across Eurasia. Immune defenses shaped over hundreds of thousands of years by a population that had already made that landscape its home, long before any newcomer ever arrived there. A species does not need to leave a complete skeleton in a museum case to still be present in the world. Presence can be measured in blood chemistry, in skin, in how a fever breaks, just as legitimately as it can be measured in a fossil pulled from limestone rock. Absorption is not disappearance, and inheritance is never quite the same thing as defeat. What the genome keeps showing, here and in case after case across human history, is that the boundaries we draw between one people and another, one species and another entirely, behave less like walls than like watersheds, porous, mixing, contributing downstream in ways that do not erase either side of the exchange. Every non-African person's genome is, in that literal sense, an unfinished archive still being read, one line at a time, by instruments that did not exist when this story was first written down as settled, uncomplicated fact a century and a half ago. This was never a contest with a clean winner and a loser sealed away safely in the past, filed and forgotten by everyone involved. It is closer to a record of ongoing contact, still legible, still quietly active even now, in the bodies of people who have no idea it is there until someone asks the right question of the evidence sitting in front of them. Here is the detail most summaries leave out entirely. In 2014, geneticists Sriram Sankararaman and David Reich at Harvard mapped precisely where Neanderthal ancestry survives in the genome and where it does not, published in Nature. They found deserts almost totally empty of it, most dramatically on the X chromosome, where it runs roughly 5-fold lower, and around genes active in the testes, a pattern that in other hybridizing species usually signals reduced hybrid male fertility. One of the largest deserts surrounds FOXP2, a gene tied to speech and language. So the real story was never simply that Neanderthal DNA survived in us. It is that natural selection has spent 50,000 years quietly editing it, gene by gene, keeping what helped, erasing what did not. Extinction was never really a full stop. For the Neanderthals, it was punctuation inside a longer sentence, still being written quietly in you right now. This channel exists for exactly this kind of story, the version of history that turns out to be true and stranger than the textbook one revision at a time. So if you don't want to miss where the next revision lands, subscribing is how you get there first. If this changed how you think about your own DNA, liking helps it reach people still working from the extinction story. And if this kind of layered, everything connects history is what kept you watching. There is another one waiting right now, built around a different people whose story turned out to be just as unfinished as this one.